Welcome to our Energy Connect studio at Gastech 2022. I'm delighted to have sitting next to me Ben Cahill, Senior Fellow in the Energy Security and Climate Change Programme for the Centre for Strategic and International Studies. Good to see you again and in person, Ben.
Yeah, it's great to see you in person after a couple video chats. This is much more fun.
Yeah, and on a busy day, really appreciate you coming round. I know you've had a paper you presented on the first day of Gastech. I'd like to hear more about what that was and then maybe discuss it.
Yeah, thanks. So my paper is on competing sources of gas demand in the Gulf.
Okay.
And we tend to think of the Gulf states as a big exporting region. But if you take a look back over the last 10, 15 years, a lot of these countries were gas short. I mean, Qatar is the big exception, obviously, with the huge LNG boom that's happened. But countries like the UAE and Kuwait became net gas importers, and Oman struggled for a long time to try to maintain its LNG exports and self-sufficiency. And that was a challenge for a long time. And there's really been a big change in the last 8, 10 years. We had price reform, some subsidy reform, and countries like the UAE really made a huge effort to go after sour gas, unconventional gas. And so now the prospects are quite good. Across Saudi Arabia, UAE, they're looking at a pretty big boom in gas production. So I talked about that, and I talked about where the gas is going to go. So some of it will go to the power sector. A lot of that depends on how fast they can grow renewables.
Yeah.
Some of it will go to blue hydrogen, and I think that's the big uncertainty.
Yeah, interesting. And I mean, obviously, where do you see what's your gas outlook for the gas market as well? We're obviously here in Milan in Europe.
Yeah.
And I think when we last discussed, the Nord Stream 1 was on a temporary shutdown.
Yep.
We've obviously moved on from there and now probably more permanent.
It certainly looks to be permanent.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's been a fundamental break between Russia and Europe, and they're not going back. I mean, even in Germany, it's hard to imagine that this government will ever have the trust in Russia as a supplier again. So this is a traumatic time. It's really difficult. I mean, everyone knows how hard this winter will be. It's really hard to find a silver lining, but if there's any, it's that the situation is now clear. There's no more waiting to come up with an emergency plan and have a drastic reevaluation of policies. It's happening now.
Yeah.
And so, from my perspective, the interesting part is we're going to see all kinds of government interventions into natural gas and electricity markets in a way that we haven't seen before. I mean, bailouts of state companies, looking at capping gas prices, trying to reduce volatility in spot gas trade in Europe, the proposals that the EU is about to consider to try to de-link natural gas prices and electricity prices. I mean, all these are big policy changes with big implications, but it's a time when we have to open the box up and think about new solutions, and it's a sobering time, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I mean, one thing at Gastech is a lot of the US LNG guys are all here, all the companies.
Yep.
But what's going on in Europe and the sobering times, but for the US LNG market could be quite a boom time or a return to having been left in the dark or not focused on for a while. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's the mood here has been interesting in the last couple of days because the US LNG exporters are having an incredible boom period. The arbitrage opportunity, if you can access cheap natural gas production in the US and sell it either to Europe or to Northeast Asia are obvious. We have another wave of LNG supply coming. It's not going to arrive in time to help Europe in the next couple winters, but certainly by the middle of the decade, I expect we're going to have a number of projects reach FID and then start to come online from 2026 on. So those guys are happy, but on the other hand, every buyer is deeply concerned.
Yeah.
Not just in Europe, but really right across the world. I think, one of the underappreciated aspects of this is how much stress and strain it's causing in South Asia and even in the wealthier countries in Northeast Asia because these prices are just crushing everyone. To me, in a way, we were sort of lucky last winter because China had softer demand. There was a lot of reselling of cargoes. It looks like that'll happen this winter because of the economic situation, but that could get challenging.
Yeah. And that will be interesting when Gastech goes to Singapore next year to see where we are towards that winter.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of revisiting this year.
Yeah.
What unexpected events happened over the course of the year and what problems were resolved, and hopefully we'll find solutions for some of this.
Yeah. And what do you think, as you said, that energy security is also back in the conversation and just what could have been done or what could be learned from what's happened? Do you think companies and policymakers are really taking that on board of what they think they can change going forward?
Yeah, I think in general, policymakers around the world, whether it's in Europe or the US or elsewhere, became pretty complacent about energy security.
Yeah.
I mean, we had years of relative abundance, pretty cheap prices. We all know that we have to make the energy transition happen as soon as possible, but there are some growing pains, as we all know, and yeah, it's been a difficult period. So in the US, I think the LNG industry feels like it's their time to shine. It's their time to help boost energy security to Europe, while obviously, making a good profit doing it. But clearly, it's not enough. I mean, the US LNG is part of the solution. Alternative LNG supplies and gas supplies for Europe are part of the solution. But to me, a huge part of this is going to have to come on the demand side.
Yeah.
And those are tough policies.
Yeah. Well, let's see where it goes. And yeah, just really appreciate you coming down, Ben. Just before we go, just obviously on day 3 of Gastech, I know you mentioned about your panel, but generally, how's the show gone for you?
It's gone great. It's just nice to see people in person. There are a lot of faces that I haven't actually met in person, so to be in the same room and have a conversation instead of just trading emails is still really satisfying. I'm still enjoying the kind of post-COVID honeymoon period of big conferences where you get to see people, so it's been a lot of fun.
Great, Ben. Well, that's great to hear. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be in touch. And there's obviously a few more shows, ADIPEC, and then there's COP27 coming up.
Yeah, great.